Sure.
Yeah, my name is Marty Green. I am by profession, a licensed clinical social worker. I'm a therapist. I've been doing it for over 20 years, and I'm a father of four. I work here at Pike. We started the Thrive Counseling Center about a year ago, and it's kind of a brief synopsis of me.
So I suspect, I could be wrong, but I suspect that as a little kid you didn't say, I'm going to be a therapist.
Right.
So as a kid, what'd you want to be as a kid?
I wanted to be an athlete, a professional athlete. Is kind of what I was most interested in doing. I wanted to play football, and that was kind of the big dream. You need to have an ability level to do that, but you find that out a little bit later. But as a kid, that's what I wanted to do.
So be an NFL professional football player?
Yeah, wide receiver. That's what I wanted to do.
And did you have somebody you emulated that you wanted to be like?
Otis Taylor was actually a tight end for the Kansas City Chiefs, and he was my dad's favorite player, and so he became my favorite player. So I emulated him.
So with that, as we think about dreams as a kid and even dreams now,
Sure.
what would be your dream job?
You know, it might kind of sound hokey, but I'm actually experiencing it right now. I wanted to start something based on a model that I've discovered is probably the most important thing we can do for people. And being at a place that was open to kind of taking a leap of faith to do it, and was kind of ripe with an interest in doing so. So I'm kind of right now experiencing kind of a culmination of almost 30 years of what people have told me that I think we really need to be conveying to everybody else, and doing it in a space where hopefully we can have some impact.
So in your life, as you said 20 years as a therapist and a lot of things you have done, anything in your life that spurred you on this path?
You know, certainly, personally, was certainly experienced some violence in my life, but I think more importantly, my parents were really, really strong advocates for social justice, and living the social gospel specifically. Those that were disconnected, those that were disenfranchised, and we really grew up not being able to not see those folks. And I think that's probably growing up. I could not see the person that was sitting alone in the cafeteria, or the folks that were being bullied in the hallway, or the hungry person that was walking down the street downtown. I could just not see those folks. And so that really continued to be kind of what spurred my interest to just try to help. I wasn't quite sure how or in what form it was going to look like, but it was too painful to see people suffering, and just allowing them to suffer, or just that nothing was being done, at least at that time, as I was trying to make sense of it. Yeah.
I mean, what a beautiful passion, right? From very early on to be able to see the kid who's by themselves, or people in need, and obviously need everywhere we go.
Right.
But as you think about your own call, if you were to try to summarize it in a sentence, how would you do that?
My call is to sit and or walk with someone in their journey, wherever that is, for however long it is, as an advocate and a listener of their narrative. That's what my call is. And so I have a profession that I'm a part of that allows me to do that. But everything that I've done prior, that had to be something that I could do, and whatever it could look like. I just discovered a form, a way to do it, that is considered legitimate, and considered, that it has some value in our culture. So, I'm a listener to the narrative. That's my call.
Would you say that now what you currently do, what you get paid for, aligns with that call?
It does. I mean, I'm certainly grateful that it allows me to pay the bills and eat. I've certainly had opportunities to just make money. I was miserable. I need to be able to have purpose and passion in what I'm doing, but more importantly, to just be with human beings on our journey. And whatever that looks like, in whatever way that I might be a part of that in some small, effort, that's really kind of what is the most important thing. And yeah, I am able to do that here in some fashion.
So, obviously, as almost a professional listener all these years, in your own story of encountering people, has there been somebody who's been really influential in shaping your life's call?
There have been so many people. I think that's what's humbling. Certainly, first and foremost, my parents. My dad was a police officer and actually started the first counseling center in a police department working with at-risk kids in the department that he was in Omaha, Nebraska. And my mom was always involved in advocacy work for the homeless and kind of a part of church in part of her faith efforts. And so those folks were certainly my first real mentors and continue to be consistent throughout my life. But certainly priests that I had worked with in my kind of formative years, advocates when I was doing community organizing. Some of the folks who came to me became some of my, professionally became some of life mentors that I could never have anticipated when I was working with the homeless, the folks on the streets, and some of the most compassionate advocacy work I've ever seen. Homeless people providing for other homeless people. All these folks in some form or fashion. There really hasn't been a significant. I have just been overwhelmingly blessed and humbled by a constant series of people that, as they share their story, or we engage in whatever moment of efforts we're doing, I'm constantly being mentored. Yeah, it's quite humbling. Yeah.
So that's very powerful. The idea of homeless people reaching out to other homeless people, and like you say, really even being mentored in the moment, right?
Absolutely.
Watching people do their thing.
Yeah.
And so if a person was watching today and they said, Marty, I want to be a therapist. I want to be someone who helps like you do. What did you do to align yourself for this career path?
Sure. I think one of the things that was most helpful is after I finished undergrad, I spent 4 years volunteering across the country in kind of various organizations, just working with people who were working with people. And without any kind of pre-context of any type of degree or power hierarchy, but just literally folks working with folks to improve something. And that was probably the richest experience that guided everything for me, just because of seeing really beautiful human resiliency and what happens when we collaborate and collectively work in a kind of shared direction. I lived in community with folks. It was not about earning a major salary, or not that it's right or wrong, but it was just basically living very presently with a purposeful direction was the most profound effect for me. And it changed my career direction because I was initially really encouraged to go into psychology and into academia and into research. And once I spent those years, it changed everything as far as how I asked questions, what I felt was really kind of important, and I moved really more into social work and looking at systemic injustice and inequality, social justice issues, and kind of shifted where I was going to put my energy professionally. So I'm a big proponent that, especially when we're discerning, is to get involved in volunteering or where we're just giving in the community, where we're a part of something bigger than ourselves, where we're just contributing. Because so often, so much unfolds and a direction much more readily unfolds because most of us don't know what we're going to do right off the get-go. If that happens, that's terrific, but the majority of us don't. We discover it, and it unfolds in front of us. But putting ourselves in places where there's purpose and meaning and passion to kind of create something or be a part of something that's just beneficial to the world we're living in, it's pretty amazing how direction really presents itself. And I'm a big proponent, especially when folks aren't sure, is to take time to go out and spend a year or two volunteering. You'll find direction. It's profound what we learn when we're just there.
You give this a kind of, what I'm hearing from you is that sometimes it's not a point A to point B to point C, straight kind of narrow
Right.
pathway. So if that's the case, did you ever run into any obstacles?
Sure.
And if so, how did you work through those obstacles to connect with your call?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, lots of obstacles. I mean, as far as things that I thought I should do, life happens or circumstances happen. I guess the capstone or the grounding always was, in what I'm doing, is it worth the effort? Is it worth the struggle? And do I find the energy in doing it, and do I get something back? Do I get energy as a result of doing it? That's always been my guiding kind of northern star, if you will. And it will always bring me back to a kind of baseline and that groundedness. As I said, I've had opportunities to be in roles that had a lots of power and potential, but I was miserable because it wasn't meaningful. It had no purpose. It was at the expense of somebody else. It was perpetuating social inequality. And once you see it, you cannot not see it. And so but sometimes it meant, well, giving up something like, fiscal opportunities, and that could have impact on family, and kind of weighing those kinds of things out. However, always going back to that purpose, meaning, and passion, it's never steered me wrong, and I have always moved forward in a way that was satisfying and fulfilling, and needs were met some way. Needs were always met somehow, right? And so I often told my family is, I may not have given my folks everything they wanted, but they've always had everything they've needed. And when people have what they need, they're pretty remarkable in their efforts to thrive. And so, and so often in our culture, one of the myths is, if you don't have everything you want, you're going to be miserable. Actually, that's not true. When we have what we need, we build a foundation to thrive.
So here you are now, empowering other people to be their best selves, to thrive, and now in the hotbed of people who maybe are totally uncertain about their call.
Sure.
So if I were to come into your office in a one-off and said, I'm struggling to understand what I'm supposed to do with my life, what advice would you give them?
Wonderful. Now the adventure can start. Because once we get rid of the expectation that we should know, we're able to loosen the shackles for us to explore what can be. And so most of the time, those expectations of what we should be doing are so often externally driven or kind of culturally driven, and it locks us into something that we can't literally give ourselves room to grow. And so when we unhook from I should know to let me see and explore, and I will come to know, we do really, really well. And so I always encourage folks when they say, I don't know yet, thank goodness. Now we can take a look at opportunities and adventures, because that's what it's about.